I never thought my life could feel so small, so hollow, until that night. I came home from work later than usual, late enough that the streetlights had already flickered on, casting long, sharp shadows across our suburban street. Our house, the one I thought was our sanctuary, sat quiet, deceptively ordinary, with the faint glow of the kitchen light leaking through the blinds. I set my bag down on the counter and tried not to notice the smell, the faint perfume that wasn't mine lingering in the air. My stomach nodded. It was subtle at first, just a fleeting sense that something was off, but instinctively I knew. I had always been careful about reading the signs. That's how I caught his lies before, or at least that's what I thought. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, trying to convince myself that I was imagining it. My husband, Jason, was meticulous, the kind of guy who kept every little detail neat, organized, like his life was a spreadsheet that needed no surprises. But that night, his car wasn't in the driveway, and there was a faint glimmer of light coming from his office upstairs. I didn't expect him to be there. I thought he'd be at his usual late meeting, probably in some conference room downtown. But instinct got the better of me. I quietly climbed the stairs, each step pressing into the silence of our home, the hum of the air conditioner filling the empty spaces. The office door was ajar, just enough for me to peek in without making a sound. And there it was. His laptop, open, the screen casting a bluish glow onto his hands as they danced over the keyboard. I froze. My pulse shot through my chest, and the air seemed thicker somehow. I didn't even need to read what he was doing. The folders labeled with names I didn't recognize, photos I wasn't supposed to see, it was all there, staring me down like a living, breathing thing. I felt my throat tighten, like I'd swallowed something that didn't belong there. I didn't move, couldn't move. And then, the chat window popped up, a message blinking from someone named Emma. The words on the screen made my stomach drop. "Can you meet tonight? I miss you." My hands shook, but I couldn't look away. I don't remember how long I stood there, trapped between disbelief and the need to confront him. Part of me screamed at me to leave, to just walk away and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But that wasn't me. I needed to know the truth. I inched closer, the carpet muffling my steps, and my eyes fell on something that would change everything. A folder labeled, Travel Plans 2018-2023. It wasn't just casual messages or innocent flirting. It was a detailed record of trips, hotel stays, secret expenses, all under the guise of business. Every city, every hotel receipt, every dinner with someone I didn't know, it was a map of a life he had built without me, a life I had somehow been blind to for years. I remember feeling like the floor dropped beneath me. I stumbled back against the wall, my hands clutching the doorframe, trying to ground myself in reality. How could he do this? How could he lie to me every single day, smile at me, tell me he loved me, all while building a secret life? I thought I knew him. I thought I understood him. But this was something else entirely. My mind was racing, bouncing between memories, reevaluating every hug, every conversation, every late night he had to work. Every small feeling of doubt I'd shoved aside because I didn't want to believe it, because I didn't want to be the paranoid wife. It all came rushing back in a torrent that I couldn't stop. I wanted to throw up, but more than that, I wanted to scream, to tear everything apart. My hands shook as I opened more folders, reading through emails, seeing names repeated over and over, like some twisted ledger of betrayal. Emma, Kate, Sarah. Each name a dagger in the back of my heart. And the dates, they matched perfectly with nights he told me he was working late, traveling for business, or out with friends. I couldn't even begin to comprehend how methodical he had been. It wasn't impulsive, it wasn't a mistake, it was years of careful planning, keeping me in the dark while building a parallel life that had nothing to do with me. I remember sitting down on the floor, back against the door, staring at the screen as if it were a mirror reflecting a life I no longer recognized. My mind was screaming, but my body refused to move. Part of me wanted to confront him right then, but another part of me was terrified of what I might do if I did. I imagined him coming in, catching me looking, and the calm, charming smile he always wore turning into something defensive, something colder. I couldn't do it yet. I needed proof, more than the folders, more than the emails. I needed something undeniable, something that would make the denial impossible, something that would make him unable to wriggle out of the truth like he always did. And then I saw it. A USB drive tucked under the keyboard.
My hands trembled as I grabbed it, my fingers slick with sweat. I didn't even hesitate. I just ran back down the stairs, out of the office, and locked myself in the bathroom. I knew what was on it. I didn't know everything, but I knew it was enough to confirm every suspicion, every gut feeling, every late-night anxiety that I had shoved aside because I wanted my life to feel safe. My pulse was deafening in my ears as I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered, and a flood of documents, photos, and videos opened up, each one more damning than the last. I saw him with women I didn't know, in hotels, in restaurants, on weekends he had claimed were for work. I saw transactions, text messages, calendar invites, all perfectly coded to hide in plain sight. I couldn't barely breathe. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was logistical, calculated, deliberate. I remember crying then, a deep, unrelenting cry, the kind that doesn't stop because it's not just sadness, it's anger, it's confusion, it's heartbreak all rolled into one. I had spent years building a life with him, believing in us, believing that what we had was real. And in that moment, I realized how little I had known. How carefully he had hidden this life from me while I was sitting in the other room, making dinners, paying bills, worrying about everything and everyone but myself. I felt like a fool, but more than that, I felt like a ghost in my own home. Everything I thought was mine, our memories, our plans, our life, was built on a lie. I remember scrolling through the files, trying to find some patterns, some explanations, some shred of humanity, and there was none. Nothing to soften the blow. He wasn't just cheating, he was living the secret life fully, without hesitation, without remorse, or so it seemed. There were hotel receipts from trips he claimed on work conferences, flight itineraries he had booked in his name and hers, emails arranging dinners and nights away. Every folder, every file was meticulously labeled, almost as if he wanted it to be found someday, almost like he knew someone would eventually stumble upon it and see the full scope of what he had done. By the time I looked up from my laptop, hours had passed. The sun had long set, and our quiet suburban street was swallowed in darkness. I was still in the bathroom, surrounded by evidence that had turned my world upside down. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to confront him, not yet.
I needed to process, to plan, to understand how someone could lead two entirely separate lives without blinking an eye. I felt hollow, like I had been emptied out from the inside, like every moment of trust I had given him had been stolen from me. The anger was there, yes, but it was mingled with grief and disbelief. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to shake him and demand answers, but I was terrified. Terrified because I loved him, and yet I hated him more than I had ever hated anyone. I kept going through the files, unable to stop. Each new photo, each new email, each new confirmation that my life had been a carefully constructed illusion made my stomach turn. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't even move without thinking about it. I realized that this wasn't just cheating. This was a full-blown double life. He had friends and colleagues who knew nothing of her, and she had no idea about me, at least not fully. It was a web, perfectly spun, with me in the center, completely unaware. And I hated that. Hated him, hated myself, hated the years of blissful ignorance that had allowed him to do this. I found myself replaying every moment, every argument, every laugh, every night we spent together. Were those moments real? Did he even feel anything when he held my hand, when he kissed me goodbye in the mornings? I wanted to believe that he loved me, that some part of this was genuine, but the evidence in front of me was damning, and my heart refused to reconcile with my mind. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was the complete rewriting of my reality. And the worst part? I could never unsee it. Not the emails, not the photos, not the receipts, not the pattern of his deception that spanned years. By the time I finally got up from the bathroom floor, dawn was creeping through the blinds. I hadn't slept. I hadn't even moved except to grab the USB in my laptop. I felt like someone else was living my life. Someone else was waking up in my house while I sat alone in the dark, trying to piece together a reality that no longer existed. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing. Nothing would ever be the same. Not our house, not our marriage, not me. I had found the proof, and now there was no going back. The first thing I did that morning was drive. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get out of the house before Jason woke up.
The streets were empty, the city still half asleep, and I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, my chest ached, and every time I thought I could breathe, another wave of nausea hit me. I pulled into a 24-hour diner on the corner of Main Street and ordered black coffee after black coffee, sitting in a booth by the window, staring at nothing. People were moving through their lives outside, oblivious, and I felt like I was looking at them through glass, disconnected, untouchable. I didn't even know if I could go back home. Part of me wanted to leave, just pack a bag and disappear for a while, let the reality of what I'd found settle somewhere else. But I also knew I couldn't. Not yet. I had to figure out exactly what I was dealing with before I made any move, and the evidence on that USB was my only anchor. I opened my laptop again, sitting in the harsh fluorescent light of the diner, and started cataloging everything. I created folders, timestamps, notes, anything that would make sense of the chaos. The more I dug, the worse it got. Jason's secret life wasn't just about other women. There were investments, side businesses, trips to cities I didn't know he had visited, dinners that weren't business dinners. It was meticulous, well-funded, and frighteningly calculated. I realized he had built a world parallel to ours, and somehow, I had been completely blind. Every time I thought I had seen it all, I would find another folder labeled 2019 Summer or Conference Trips, and the photos inside would show him with someone else. In hotels, in restaurants, laughing, holding hands, the casual intimacy that he had denied me in our own home. And I knew it wasn't just fleeting encounters. It was consistent, methodical, intentional. I remember one folder in particular that made me physically recoil. It was labeled Seattle 2020, and it contained videos from a weekend he had told me was a work retreat. There he was, on video, in a hotel room with a woman I had never met. I paused the video, froze, and just stared. My stomach turned inside out. I wanted to close it, delete it, pretend I hadn't seen it, but my fingers moved against my will. I kept watching, frame by frame, until the entire thing was burned into my brain. The way he laughed, the way she leaned into him, the way he whispered things that were meant only for her ears. I felt sick and furious and heartbroken all at once. I had lived with this man, slept in the same bed, made plans for a future together, and all the while, he had been somewhere else entirely. My world, the one I had built and believed in, was a lie. After hours of going through files, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about him cheating. It was about the fact that he had compartmentalized his life so completely that he had become someone I didn't know. He was two people, and both of them were very convincing. At home, he was the perfect husband, charming, attentive, loving when it suited him. Outside, he was someone else entirely, secretive, calculating, unrepentant. The thought that he could look me in the eyes and tell me he loved me while having done all this made my stomach turn in knots. I felt a mix of rage and deep, burning betrayal, but I also felt lost, like I had been living a shadow of my own life, and the person I trusted most had been building a secret empire of deceit under my nose. I went back home that afternoon. The house felt different, almost hostile, and the smell hit me again, the faint perfume in the air that wasn't mine. My hands trembled as I set the laptop down on the kitchen table, and I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat. Jason wasn't home yet, which I was grateful for. I had no idea how I would even begin to confront him. I didn't even know what I wanted. Revenge? Answers? Closure? Part of me wanted to scream until my voice broke, to hurl accusations that would destroy the perfect facade he had built. But another part of me just wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. I wandered through our house, touching objects that suddenly felt foreign, every photograph and souvenir taunting me. This was my life, and it wasn't mine anymore. I went up to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling. The memories I had once treasured, our first apartment together, the nights we stayed up talking about nothing, the dinners we made together, were tainted now. I kept imagining him in the places I had seen in the files, laughing, touching someone else, whispering things to someone I didn't know. And the worst part was knowing that he was probably still capable of smiling at me, telling me he loved me, and making me feel like everything was fine, while I had been living a lie. I felt the walls of the room closing in, suffocating me. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. Not without facing him. Not without knowing why he had done this. By evening, he finally came home. I had been pacing the living room, my stomach knotted, my hands trembling.
When he walked in, he smiled at me, the same smile I had loved for years, and I felt bile rise in my throat. How could he be so calm, so normal, so human, when my entire reality had been shattered? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to act like nothing had changed. I wanted to see if he would slip, if he would reveal anything without me saying a word. But he didn't. He hung his coat, kissed me on the cheek, and asked about my day as if nothing had happened. I wanted to scream, to tell him everything, but the words got stuck in my throat. Dinner that night was surreal. We sat across from each other, eating in silence, the weight of the secret I carried pressing down on me like a physical object. Every gesture, every word, every laugh from him felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted him to drop something, anything that would hint at the double life I had discovered. But he didn't. He was perfect, too perfect, and that terrified me even more. I realized that if he could maintain this facade in front of me after I had discovered him, there was no limit to how much control he had over our reality. After dinner, I excused myself, claiming I needed to work on something. I went back to the office and sat down with the USB again, determined to find more concrete proof that would make confrontation unavoidable. I had to know exactly what I was dealing with. There were still gaps, periods where I couldn't account for him, and I needed to fill in those gaps. Hours passed. I barely ate, barely slept, barely moved. I felt like I was living in a fever dream. And the more I dug, the more I realized just how meticulously he had hidden this life. There were encrypted folders, hidden emails, and even financial accounts I didn't know about. He had built something that didn't just involve women. He had built a parallel existence that I had no access to, no control over, and apparently no awareness of. Then came the night I couldn't sleep, when everything hit me at once. I sat on our bed, the laptop on my knees, staring at files that spanned years, watching videos that made me feel sick, and I started to cry. Not just because of the betrayal, but because I realized how easy it had been for him to do this without me ever noticing. I remembered moments when I had doubted myself, felt jealous or suspicious, and how he had always deflected, explained, charmed, or distracted me. It wasn't just luck or secrecy, it was strategy. Every time I had trusted him, I had been manipulated into believing he was faithful. And the awareness of that manipulation was worse than the betrayal itself. By the time morning came again, I had made a plan. Not a confrontation yet, not an ultimatum, but a plan. I couldn't just live in this half-truth pretending everything was fine. I had to be prepared for whatever came next. I backed up everything from the USB, printed copies of key emails and receipts, and even sent a few documents to a secure email account I had created. I felt a strange sense of control, as if by preserving evidence, I could somehow level the playing field. I knew I couldn't erase the damage, but I could arm myself for the inevitable confrontation. That morning, when Jason kissed me goodbye and left for work, I felt nothing. No love, no warmth, no trust. Just a hollow space where everything we had once been existed. I realized I was living with a stranger, and I knew deep down that the person I had loved, maybe still loved, had been hiding behind a mask all these years. I didn't know how I would face him, how I would confront him, or even if I wanted to, but I knew one thing. I could never unsee what I had found. Every memory, every moment, every day we had spent together now carried a weight I could never shake. And the realization that he had done this so carefully, for so long, left me both terrified and furious, knowing that our marriage as I had understood it was gone forever. The confrontation came sooner than I expected, though not in the way I had planned. It was a Thursday evening,
and I had spent the entire day going through files again, obsessively cataloging, double-checking, printing copies, making sure there was no way he could weasel his way out if I chose to confront him. My hands were sore from scrolling, my eyes dry from staring at the screen, but I couldn't stop. I needed to have all the pieces in front of me. By the time Jason came home that night, I was exhausted, hollow, and trembling with anticipation. The house smelled like dinner he had prepared himself, something I barely notice now, the aroma taunting me with its normalcy. When he walked through the door, he smiled the same smile he always did, the one that used to make my heart lift, make me forget the rest of the world. But now it made me sick. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just stood in the hallway, arms crossed, staring at him. He hesitated, sensing something, his smile faltering slightly, but he kept his composure. "Hey, you okay?" he asked cautiously, like approaching a wounded animal. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "We need to talk," I said, my voice shaking, but steady enough to cut through the quiet. He tilted his head, confused. "About what?" He had no idea. He really had no clue that I had discovered everything. I could see the gears turning in his mind as he tried to figure out which angle I was coming from. I wanted to scream, to throw the files at him, to make him see the damage he had done. But I restrained myself. I needed to do this right. I needed to see him squirm. "About you," I said simply. "About your other life." At that, the color drained from his face just slightly, and his calm demeanor faltered for the briefest moment. But then he composed himself again, masking it with a shrug. "What are you talking about?" he asked. The casualness of his voice made my blood boil. I wanted to hit him, shake him until he admitted it, but instead, I pulled out a printed folder, laid it on the table, and watched his eyes widen. Not with shock, not with denial, just a flicker of something dark and practiced. He recognized the evidence. He knew he couldn't lie his way out of it. "I know everything," I said, my voice stronger now, steadier than I expected. "The trips, the hotels, the dinners, the women, the emails, the calendar invites. I have it all. Years of it. You've built a whole other life, and I've been living in the shadow of it. I know about Emma, Kate, Sarah, every trip you lied about, every excuse. I know it all." I watched him carefully, looking for the cracks, the remorse, the shame. But he only sighed, running a hand through his hair, like he was tired of this conversation before it had even begun. "I didn't think you'd find out," he said quietly. Not defensive, not apologetic, just quiet, almost bored. My stomach turned. This was the man I had shared my life with, the one who had smiled at me in the mornings, held my hand at night, and told me he loved me. Yet he had done this. And now, even when caught, he didn't seem to care enough to explain, to beg, to cry. He just existed. "I can't even begin to understand why," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Why would you do this? How could you do this to me, to us?" He looked at me for a long time, and for a fleeting moment I thought maybe he would break, maybe he would finally show the human side of this betrayal. But no, he just shook his head.
"I don't know what you expect me to say," he said, his tone clipped. "I made choices. Choices I'm responsible for. But you've seen it all now. There's nothing to hide." I felt a surge of anger that was so sharp it made me feel dizzy. Choices? Choices? This isn't choices. This is a life you built behind my back while I was trying to build a life with you. You lied about every single thing, every single day. You made me believe we were a team, that we were building something together, and it was all fake. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the folders. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. The fury inside me had reached a boiling point. He didn't flinch. He just looked at me, eyes steady, calm, almost unnervingly so. "I did what I wanted. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't think you'd find out. That's all there is to it." That sentence hit me like a physical blow. The casualness of it, the lack of remorse, the absence of even a flicker of guilt. It was worse than the affair itself. Worse than all the lies. He didn't regret it. He didn't care. He just accepted it as a fact. Like I should too. I remember sitting down, suddenly overwhelmed, the weight of it crashing down on me. I felt hollow, like I had been drained of everything I had been holding on to. Years of love, of trust, of hope suddenly evaporated into nothing. My mind raced, trying to process it, to understand it,
but there was nothing to understand. There were no excuses, no justifications, no appeals to reason. It was raw, cold, and calculated. He had lived this life, and now he had to deal with me knowing. And somehow, that was enough for him. I couldn't stay in the room any longer. I grabbed my bag and left, walking out into the night, not knowing where I was going. The streets were empty, the air heavy, and I felt like a ghost wandering through a city that didn't care about me. I walked for hours, aimlessly, the documents in my bag pressed against my side like a lifeline. Every time I tried to think, I was pulled back into the images, the emails, the receipts, the proof of his betrayal. I couldn't escape it. There was no going back. Not for us, not for me, not for the life I thought we had. When I finally returned home the next morning, I felt like someone else entirely. I was quieter, more distant, calculating. I spent the day again going through the files, marking, cross-referencing, trying to understand just how long this had been going on, how deep it went. The more I looked, the more layers I found. It wasn't just casual cheating or a series of impulsive mistakes, it was systematic. He had orchestrated this double life like a master planner, keeping everything meticulously hidden. Every receipt, every flight, every dinner, every hotel, he had documented it all in a way that could survive years, and it had, until now. By that evening, I had begun planning my next moves. I wasn't going to confront him with rage again, not yet. Not until I had every angle covered, every piece of leverage I might need, every layer of evidence in my hands. I had to think strategically, because now that I knew, I couldn't trust him, not at all, not for a second. And the realization that the man I had trusted most in the world could lie to me with such precision, with such ease, left me cold. But I also felt something else, something unexpected. A sharp, burning need to reclaim control, to not be the victim in this story. He had taken years from me, yes, but I wasn't going to let him have the satisfaction of watching me crumble entirely. I started mapping out what I could do, legally, financially, emotionally. I made mental lists, contingency plans, backup plans, and escape routes. I realized that he had created a world I could no longer be a part of, but I could protect myself. I could fight back, in whatever form that needed to take. I spent the next week living like a shadow, navigating our home and life as if I were both present and absent. I talked to him minimally, never revealing how much I knew, never giving him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I watched his patterns, his routines, his subtle tells, the small gestures, the slips, the moments where his careful facade cracked ever so slightly. It was like learning a new language, one I wished I never had to know. And yet, I couldn't look away. The mixture of fear, anger, and curiosity kept me tethered to him even as I prepared for the eventual fallout. And then came the night I found the last piece of the puzzle. I had been digging through old emails, cross-referencing hotel stays, receipts, and calendar invites, trying to map his entire secret life. That's when I found the one file I hadn't expected. A folder labeled Long-Term Arrangements. Inside were contracts, signed documents, evidence of financial commitments to another person that were disguised as business dealings. Jason had built not just relationships, but entire arrangements, carefully constructed to shield him, to give him freedom, and to ensure that even if I suspected, there was no way to prove it without digging like I had been doing for weeks. My hands shook so violently, I had to set the laptop down. I remember sitting back, chest heaving, trying to breathe, trying to wrap my head around the scale of what I had uncovered. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a double life built with such precision that it was almost unimaginable. And the weight of that realization hit me like a freight train. Every smile, every touch, every promise he had made to me, tainted, meaningless, a part of a carefully staged performance. And yet, even as I recoiled from the betrayal, I felt a strange kind of clarity. I saw him, for the first time, as he truly was. Not my husband, not the man I loved, but a stranger who had inhabited my life for years, hiding behind the mask I had trusted so completely. I woke up that morning with a strange sense of calm. Not peace, not relief, just a cold, calculated clarity. The weight of what I had discovered over the past weeks pressed down on me, but instead of breaking me, it focused me. I had the proof. I knew everything. And now it was time to decide what to do with it. I didn't want to explode in anger, didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I wanted control. I wanted him to understand that every single secret, every single lie, every single betrayal would be accounted for. I started the day methodically. I moved through our house like a ghost, packing discreetly, organizing files, making copies, photographing evidence, backing everything up to secure drives and cloud accounts. Every folder, every email, every receipt, every photograph had to be documented. I wasn't just doing it for myself. I needed to have everything in order in case he tried to deny it, to spin it, to gaslight me the way he had so many times before. The meticulous Assad gave me a strange sense of power. After weeks of feeling violated, of being blindsided by his hidden life, this was the one thing I could control, the truth laid bare. When he came home that evening, I didn't greet him, I didn't smile, I didn't pretend. He paused in the doorway, sensing the tension immediately. "You've been quiet all day," he said. Cautious now, a flicker of worry in his eyes. I didn't respond. I just stood there, calm, collected, carrying the weight of every secret he had ever tried to hide.
He studied me, the subtle shift in my demeanor, and I could see the flicker of fear. Finally, I spoke. "Jason, it's time to talk. And this time, it's not going to be about excuses or deflection. It's going to be about facts." He didn't move, didn't argue. He just nodded slightly, like he was preparing for something inevitable. I laid out the files on the dining room table, separating them into years, naming the women, labeling every trip, every receipt, every arrangement. I watched him as I did it, observing how he reacted to each folder, each printout. There was no shock, no shame, just a slow, deliberate understanding that I had him cornered, that there was no escaping the truth anymore. "I've documented everything," I said, my voice steady. "Every lie, every secret trip, every woman, every hotel, every dinner, every flight. You can't deny it. You can't gaslight me. You can't spin this into anything other than what it is. You've been living a double life, right under my nose, for years." He shifted in his chair, eyes darting to each folder, to each photo. For the first time in weeks, I saw the faintest glimmer of something human, fear, maybe regret, maybe just realization. I didn't expect you to find it all," he admitted, his voice tight. I thought I was careful." "Careful?" I repeated, incredulous. "Careful? You built an entire separate existence while I was at home, believing we were building a life together. Careful? You call this careful? This is betrayal. This is deception. This is years of lies. And you knew it. You knew it every single day." I could feel the anger rising, but I tempered it, holding back the impulse to scream or throw something. I wanted this to be precise, calculated. I wanted him to understand exactly what he had done and the power of what I now held in my hands. He leaned back in the chair, silent for a long moment, eyes flickering across the evidence, finally resting on me. I messed up," he said quietly. Not an apology, not a plea, just an admission. My chest tightened at the simplicity of it. That was it. That was all he had to say after everything. "Mess up?" I asked, disbelief lacing my voice. "Mess up? This isn't a mistake you can fix with a shrug or a word. You've spent years hiding a life from me, manipulating me, making me believe every single lie you told, and now you just say you messed up?" He didn't answer. He just stared, and in that silence, I felt the years of manipulation, the charm, the lies, the trust he had stolen, crashing over me all at once. I realized that the man I loved, or thought I loved, no longer existed, not as I knew him. What existed was someone capable of planning, lying, and betraying on a scale I couldn't have imagined. I hated him, yes, but I also hated myself for believing him,
for trusting him, for ignoring those little nagging instincts over the years. I remember sitting down across from him, the folders between us, and feeling the weight of it all. My hands were steady now, my mind sharp. "You're going to have to face the consequences," I said calmly. "Not because I want revenge, not because I want to punish you, but because you have to understand the scale of what you've done and how carefully you've destroyed the life we built together. And I need to protect myself. I can't live in a house with someone who can betray me this completely." For the first time, I saw him flinch, not the confident, charming husband I had known, but a man stripped of control. I saw the fear, the realization that the truth couldn't be hidden, the understanding that the web he had built around me for years was finally untangled. And in that moment, I felt a strange mixture of relief and vindication. Relief that I had the proof, that I had the power to control my own life now, and vindication because he could no longer manipulate or deceive me. Over the next few days, everything shifted. I moved through our home differently, navigating spaces that once felt warm and familiar, but now felt like the set of a movie I had been unwittingly cast in. I contacted a lawyer discreetly, making sure I understood my rights, making sure that every piece of evidence I had would protect me. I spoke to close friends selectively, framing it in terms that allowed me to keep control over the narrative while ensuring I had support. And all the while, Jason watched, silent, tense, aware that the game had changed and that the woman he had spent years deceiving was no longer the same person. I had always imagined what confronting him would feel like, what unraveling the truth would bring, but nothing could have prepared me for the intensity of it. The betrayal was personal, profound, and almost cinematic in its scope. I had known in theory that people were capable of deception, but living it, seeing it, holding it in my hands, it was overwhelming. Every memory, every shared laugh, every late-night talk, every ordinary day we had spent together, tainting. I couldn't unsee it, and yet, even in the depths of that horror, I found clarity, a focus I had never had before. I knew exactly who he was, exactly what he had done, and exactly what I needed to do next. By the end of that week, the house was quiet, almost eerily so. I had created a routine that allowed me to maintain control, to assert my independence, to prepare for what would come next. Jason was present physically, but absent emotionally. I watched him, not with fear anymore, but with a calculating eye. Every interaction, every word, every gesture was being measured, evaluated. He had once held all the power in our marriage, the knowledge, the charm, the control. But now, that power had shifted. I had the proof, I had the evidence, and I had the ability to determine the next chapter of my life, whether it included him or not. And finally, after weeks of processing, I realized something. I wasn't broken. I wasn't destroyed. I had been blindsided, betrayed, and manipulated, yes, but I had survived. I had faced the unimaginable truth and found clarity. I had exposed the lies, cataloged the deceit, and claimed control over my own reality. Jason had built a secret life, hidden it from me, and lived it with precision, but I had found the truth, and the truth was mine. My anger, my grief, my fear, they were real, raw, and human, but they were also fuel for reclaiming my life, my autonomy, my identity. That night, sitting alone in our bedroom, I closed the laptop, stacked the folders neatly, and exhaled. I didn't know what the future held. Divorce, confrontation, legal battles, emotional fallout. But I did know one thing with absolute certainty. I could never unsee the truth, and I would never allow anyone, not even Jason, to manipulate or control me again. I had the proof, I had the power, and I had the resolve to face whatever came next.